Then we then talk about exposure. So what's exposure? It's the elements at risk from those natural hazards. And so we need to understand where they are and what are the characteristics of those elements at risk. Very closely associated with exposure is vulnerability. And that is trying to understand how those elements at risk might respond to those events. So what we can do then is integrate all of that information together and quantify the impacts. So we can start to understand how the proportion of damage, the quantity of damage to buildings and infrastructure, the economic losses associated with those events, and in some cases we can get a sense of the casualties and the different types of casualties that we're likely to experience. The next part of the presentation is a bit of an overview of some work that Geoscience Australia has done with our Government of Philippines partners. And it's work that was actually triggered from the passage of Typhoon Ondoy. And it's actually an interesting coincidence that today is the 6th anniversary of the passage of Typhoon Ondoy over the Philippines. So one of the first things that was done as part of this project was to collect some new information that had never been collected before in the Greater Metro Manila area. And this was very high resolution elevation and surface data from a technology called LiDAR. LiDAR is a technology with a sensor on board an aircraft, essentially scans the ground as the aircraft is flying along, and the result is very, very detailed, highly accurate, three-dimensional terrain and surface data. And so there's some details about the sort of quantity of information that was collected in that work. And this was then the basis for undertaking hazard modelling. There's just an example of how we can visualise Manila through the use of this data. So the data was fundamental as an input to modelling 3 hazards: severe wind from tropical cyclone, riverine flooding, inundation, and earthquake ground shaking. And so for severe wind, it's important to understand how wind flows over different types of terrain and how different surface features might change the flow. So the LiDAR was very important for that work. And we can see outputs such as maps of the severe wind field. Similarly, the way that floodwaters move through areas is very much influenced by the shape of the terrain. And so from the work, we can also derive models of flood inundation. And similarly, with earthquake information, there's the terrain is somewhat influences the way that energy is propagated through the earth, and so this work resulted also in some hazard maps. And through the combination of a LiDAR and other spatial information provided by local governments and national government, we were then able to characterise the exposure, that is the buildings and the population across the Greater Metro Manila area, and that's just an example of the sort of outputs that we have. So we are able to quantify the risks from those hazards and produce a number of information products. So that information then serves as a lifeline tool for helping to save lives, protect investments and economic gains, and to protect livelihoods. But how do we do that? It can be done through a number of ways. It's through better land use planning, so that we're not building in areas that are highly hazard prone. We strengthen critical infrastructure and buildings so that they're able to withstand all of the effects. For informing better preparation and response, so that when an event comes up, the response is more effective. And for investing in recovery and mitigation. So we can use the data for all those things, but particularly when we use it for mitigating and preparing, we're actually participating in reducing the risk from disasters. But disaster and risk information is really effective when it's credible, it's based on science, it's reliable, we can rely on it for making decisions. It's fit for purpose, it's not being used for something else. It's discoverable. We can find that information and know that it's there, and it's accessible. We can actually get to the information and start to use it. It's usable. It's in a format that's going to be suitable. Digital formats are very important in that regard. And it's used appropriately, so it's it's not misused. And okay, so that's essentially my 7 minutes. So thank you very much again for the opportunity, and